We are doing part 5 of my interview with Judith Lynn Thorne Wagoner. And this time we're going to start with, since my father and her husband Darwin was not able to be interviewed, we're going to ask Mom what she knows about Darwin Onus Wagoner's life growing up.
Okay, Darwin was born in June 12th in 1942 at Chansey, Illinois. He was the 5th child of that Wagoner family, and the baby. The rest of them were all grown up. He was just the last one. And he was very cute. He was very much loved. They were good parents, but they were very busy parents because they were farm people. They had a farm and a lot of work to do. And his mother canned and raised garden crops and cooked and washed and all that kind of thing that they all have to do. And so he did for a while have his next oldest sister, Ivana, at home. She was 5 years older than him, and she was there for a few years, and they would play when he got a little bigger to mess around and have fun. His mother would mop the floors. They had linoleum on their floors, and she would mop them, and the kids they would get on a rug, and Ivana would pull him around, and they'd crash around, and just really have fun. Darwin remembers doing that. And he was a typical farm kid. He loved to go out in the barnyard and the barn, and they had an old horse that was mostly blind, I believe, and it had been around for a long time. And when Darwin got big enough, he'd ride it around, and then he was probably mostly at home by himself a lot. He had a cousin, Marion. He and his family lived just maybe a mile, I don't think even a mile from them. And Marion's dad was Darwin's dad, his brother. Darwin's dad was George Wagoner, and he was the oldest son, and he had 3 other brothers, Omer and Fay, and Paul was the youngest one. Omer had probably 5 or 6 kids, he and his wife. She was a real sweet lady. And Darwin's parents, of course, had altogether they had 5 children. They had the oldest was Vondine, who married a Fritchley, and she had 5 kids. And her one of her wasn't the youngest, but one of her children was the same age as Darwin, and so they were always close, even though Darrell was his name, and he was a lot taller than Darwin, and he would always come up and look down at him and say, "Hello, Uncle Darwin," and they used to tease like that. And then she had a couple of girls, and she had, I think, 3 boys and 2 girls. And then the next sister to Vondine, which was next to her in line, was Laureen, and she looked a lot like Darwin's mother. They supposedly, I didn't ever meet any of them because Darwin's mother died when he was 12. But Laureen, her daughter looked real like her. They said that they were enough alike to look like twins. And then they had Marvin, Darwin's brother, and then they had Ivana, Darwin's sister, and she's the one that was home for a while when he was little. And then of course Darwin. They were all older than him. His two oldest siblings were just about as old as my parents, and so it was kind of that situation in their family line. And so Marion would and Darwin would play together a lot. They lived close enough that they'd go to each other's house and play. And country kids, play out in the barn, out in the fields, and wherever. And Darwin said when they got a little bigger, they all wanted to smoke, and all they had to smoke was some grapevine, and so they did that occasionally.
And banana peels?
I never heard that.
Oh, okay,
Just
must
the
have been somebody
grapevine.
else.
And then they went to Darwin and his cousins. They all went to Cranston Methodist Church, which is a little tiny church, just maybe not even a mile from where Darwin grew up, and it was a small congregation, and I think all of that family went there, and by the way, Cranston Church was destroyed by a tornado back when Darwin was in college, and there's a marker there today for it. But that's kind of sad. And then Darwin and Marion, they went in their early elementary school grades. They went to Cranston Elementary School, which was right up near that church. And then I don't know, maybe when he was in the 3rd or 4th grade, he went into Chansey Elementary School, which was a nice sized school, and it had all 8th grades in it, I think, and it was a big 2 or 3 room school, and
But his first school was a 1 room, you said?
yeah, a little tiny school, and then I'm trying to think. There was a little girl that liked Darwin. I can't remember her name. He talked about her a lot, actually laughing about it. But he, mentioned her. Can't remember her name. She went to grade school with him too, and they played softball and basketball, and it was a nice way to grow up. It was. Darwin, and when he got big enough, he helped his dad on the farm. He learned. He always laughed and said he learned to drive a tractor when he was 3 years old. Could have, who knows? But anyway, he did that. He helped his dad farm. He had a dog. His name was Lassie. He was a purebred collie, a great big, beautiful purebred collie. They got him from a friend of Jack Ribley's. Jack was a brother-in-law to Darwin. He married the second daughter there, Laureen, and Jack, the guy that Jack knew, had this dog, and so they had him for quite a while. And I don't know if it was him or if it was another dog that Darwin had, but they had him tied to the fence.
It was him, I think. I think it was Dad's dog.
Well, it was his dog, but I don't know if it was that dog.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But they had him tied to a fence one day, and they left. They had to go somewhere, and the dog jumped over the fence and hanged himself, and that was sad for Darwin. And then when in grade school, he used to enjoy that. Now they did have. I think they had a cafeteria there the whole time in that school. But sometimes Darwin preferred to go across the street to the store there. I'm trying to think of the name of it. The man that ran it was a relative of Darwin's mother's, probably an uncle or a brother. And it was a little store, little country store there. In that town, there was a little country filling station on the corner and a little country store and a couple of other churches in that little town. But anyway, Darwin would go over there for lunch, and he could buy, for a quarter, he could buy a bottle of pop, and he could buy a ham sandwich of some sort, and maybe a candy bar. I can't remember what it was. It was very
chips and a cookie. I think it was bologna sandwich, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Chips, a cookie, and a soda
Oh, was that what it was?
for 25 cents. Yeah.
So anyway, and he used to talk about that. And but he did real well in school. He had his early teacher. I'm trying to think of her name. She absolutely adored him, and he always did well in school. He always made real good grades, and it was interesting when Darwin and I were married for 25 years. Mother put a notice in our hometown paper in Bridgeport, where we went to high school there, and that we were married 25 years. And Keplinger is her last name, that teacher, and she wrote Darwin a nice letter and mentioned how cute he was and how she liked him. He was such a nice boy when he was little. And then he liked to play baseball. They all played baseball. In fact, they had a baseball team, and they went to different schools and played from that Chansey school. And he had some good close friends. They went all through most of the grade school together and all of high school together. And
played football too, right?
Well, it wasn't an official team. They'd get together and play sports, just for fun. One day, when he was in high school, in fact, that was when he was dating me, about a senior in high school, they had a football game, just a bunch of them, and a lot had one, and he got trounced by a big kid, and it knocked him out, and he was able to drive home, but after that, that affected him a long time, and he was troubled.
Had a concussion.
Pardon?
Probably had a concussion.
Yeah, I imagine, but of course he didn't go to the doctor, But anyway, Darwin's mother died when he was 12, and he still stayed there and lived with his dad. His dad then was basically retired. He had to sell a lot of his land and his property to pay the terrible hospital bill for Darwin's mother. She had Hodgkin's disease, and back then that was a death. Everybody died from that. Today it's nothing, but back then it was. And so they were fairly poor. And but Darwin always maintained pigs to raise, and all the time he was in high school, he had more money than the rest of the kids. He always had a good car, and Darwin's dad was retired, and he had some buddies, Jim and Pete, I think they were brothers, two old guys, and they would go to antique stores and antique shops and to big sales and anywhere and collect antiques. And Darwin's dad he liked clocks, and he would fix them up, and he had a whole lot of antique clocks in his house and stuff like that, and so that was his hobby, and he had a real good time doing that. He talked about those guys all the time. They were always out going somewhere doing that, for fun. And and Darwin had a lot of freedom. I mean, his dad took good care of him. He was all right. Darwin was always a nice kid. He was always a good little boy, but so he never got in trouble. But he had a lot of freedom. A lot of kids with that kind of freedom might have gotten in trouble, but he never got in the wrong bunch. All of his friends, just like mine when I was a kid, they were all good kids. They came from good homes and loving homes, and none of them did anything bad, And so that was lucky for Darwin and I both as young kids, that we never got in trouble. And then, so anyway, Darwin, when he, I think his dad used to pick up a bunch of kids. They didn't have a bus for that Chancey grade school, but Darwin's dad used to drive sort of a pickup. He would pick up several kids and take them to school most days. And then Darwin's dad had a job working where they lived in Chancey, Illinois. It was not in the same county that I lived in. It was like 20 miles away from where I grew up. I didn't even know Darwin until I went to high school. But there was well, Darwin's dad, he was in Crawford County, which the county seat is Robinson, Illinois. And his dad was elected to be, I don't know what his official title was, but he would go around and collect things and check on things for the county, you know, in that area where he lived. He loved that job. And he told me once he would have rather had that kind of a job than ever farming. He never really liked to farm.
He was an extrovert?
Yeah, he was always real happy and jolly. He was a big fat guy, and he was real happy and jolly, and he was always fun and talkative. You know, I liked him a lot, and he was friendly to me. I felt real comfortable with him. I didn't with the rest of the family, but I really did with him. And
He used to make prank calls for Dad.
oh, yeah, they had one of these phones that would ring on the wall, and Darwin's dad didn't ever want Darwin to sleep late. And so he'd go down and he'd ring. Darwin was always wanting a job from somebody. If somebody had a job, Darwin would go so he could earn some money. And his dad would go down and ring that phone, and then he would talk on it and say, yeah, he's still here, you know, and, oh, you got a job for him, you know. and and by that time, Darwin, of course, he was talking loud, so Darwin was usually upstairs in bed, and he was talking loud, and Darwin would run down and, you know, wanted to know who was on the phone, who wanted him. Oh, and his dad said, oh, nobody, I don't know what you're talking about. And that was the way he used to get Darwin up in the mornings sometimes.
And he used to knock on the walls, look in the windows.
Yeah, he was always a real jokester. He was always teasing the kids. And he loved nothing more than to scare the little kids. And of course, he had a whole house full of grandchildren, because he had 5 kids. And of course, Darwin at that time didn't have any. He wasn't married, but he didn't have any kids. And Yvonne just had one little boy, but the rest of them had several children. And he was always telling a scary story and making noises and, you know, knocking on the wall and things like that to scare them. And there was one. They had a little back porch that was all kind of closed in, and he had a big old black overcoat out there. And he would tell the kids terrible, scary stories about that coat. And one of Darwin's nephews, not long ago, well, just a few years ago, we were laughing about it, and he said even to this day he's still scared of that coat. And so, yes, Darwin's dad, he never hesitated to do anything like that. He was funny. He was fun. And then, let's see.
There was the outhouse too.
Oh yeah, I really had an outhouse back then. And a chicken house, had chickens, they had an orchard. They had a pig lot where there were a lot of pigs in it. I think they had a few cattle. One year after I was married to Darwin, we'd visit there, and his dad decided he was going to invest in ducks. He had a whole bunch of these little brown ducks, and they were so cute when they were babies. He just bought a whole bunch of them, and they were so cute. He always had some chickens, and you know, it was just a typical little tiny farm.
And he ate squirrels.
Oh yeah, they always went hunting. And yeah, they would have squirrel, and Darwin used to tell about their Where his school was in Chansey was also, just like it is today, it's a kind of a meeting house and for activities for the rural people. And they would have a big pie supper and a big soup supper and things like that. And Darwin said they'd have this big chili or chowder supper. And he said you never knew what was in it. Lots of times they would put possum and raccoon in it. And he said they don't taste bad, you know. We always think of them as little pet things, you know, little furry creatures. And
Tell about Papa's.
oh, right down the street, just a little ways, just walking, you know, take 2 minutes to walk there. There was another farm, and but on the same road, and that belonged to another Wagoner, but it was spelled differently. It was Wagner. I'm trying to think of his name. He and his wife lived there, and they had grandchildren, but and so they were nice to Darwin. He'd go down there occasionally and play and visit him, and they feed him, you know, and give him treats. And anyway, they had a dog that they called Puppus.
And a cat named Pity Sing.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Yeah, a cat. That's right, a cat named Pity Sing. And Darwin always made fun of those things. He'd laugh because Mabel was the lady there that lived there, Mabel Wagner, and she'd go to the door and she'd say, "Here, Pity Sing, here, Pity Sing, here, Pity." And Darwin was always imitating that. And when she called, and then the dog, and then one, of course, typical rural country kids. At Halloween, they'd have a ball. And they'd push over outhouses sometimes and just do all kinds of ornery things. And one year they pushed over, and I don't know if it was that Mr. Wagner down there. I don't know who it was. They pushed it over, and the guy was in and out the outhouse. Well, they were ornery. And today they'd be put in jail for doing something like that.
And Papa's was not fixed, was not
yeah,
neutered.
yeah, they what was that guy's name? Wagner. Mabel and anyway, he fixed Papa's himself. They would put back then it was common to they were used to what's the term? Emasculating, the animals. Castrating them.
Or neutering.
And so for on a farm, that's a common thing. And so anyway, he would always just take care of his own dogs whenever he had a dog, and because a dog run the neighborhood, run the countryside chasing a female. And so whenever he ever had a dog, and anyway, what he did to Puppus, he put him head first into a boot and squeezed the little
gonad.
Yeah.
That's painful.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. But once they don't remove them. I don't think they had to remove them. They would just dry off. But that's the way they did a lot of that. Just squeeze it to the point where the blood vessels broken inside. And then they used to eat those too. A lot of people ate that kind of stuff. Darwin's dad always did, stuff like that. I mean, he didn't go out of his way to hunt them up, and people would go hunting and stuff like that. I don't remember Darwin's dad doing that, if any. I'm sure he did, but, and then, they had a big barn, and Darwin's nephews, his oldest sister's sons, Daryl and Voyle and Verlin. She had 3 boys, and they were close to Darwin's age. And they would come and visit, and they'd go out and they'd go to the barn. They do all kinds of things. They had a ball. They still talk about the day whenever they're around, or they did whenever they're around each other. But anyway, there was one time when there were some bees in the barn, and so they got some wood, and they kind of chased the bees to where they could do it, and then they would hit the bees to try to kill them, you know, as they went like playing ball with them, you know. That's typical farm life. And I remember Darwin telling about that. And there was a big cemetery there in Chansey, and it was called the Wagoner Cemetery, and that land for that cemetery had been donated by Darwin's great-grandfather or grandfather. They had been there for many, you know, a hundred years or so in that area. And so all of Darwin's family is buried there, you know, so that's was a nice cemetery. And
Back to when Dad's mom died, when he was 12, he talked about her, the tradition was is that she would lay in state in their
at their farmhouse and their
yeah,
house.
and she was there for like a week
Oh no, I don't think so.
or 3 days maybe.
Maybe, I don't know.
Several days.
Not very long.
And that was really hard for him because
Yeah, it was.
she was there but she wasn't there, and
Right.
it was kind of
And he
creepy
was
for
pretty
him.
little.
And
He was 12.
he didn't really understand.
He
and-
was 12 when she died. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and that was it was hard on him, and so anyway, and she was loved by the neighbors, and everybody thought she was a wonderful person. So you know, they had a lot of people in, and he had let's see, Paul, his uncle Paul, didn't ever have children, but he had his wife was named Irene, and I remember she was, of course, at the church where they all went, she would lead the singing, and she had this real loud voice, you know, and then the other brother, Fay, he didn't have any children either, but he was a cantankerous guy, and they used to get aggravated at him a lot, but he'd show up and he'd come and complain about something, you know, that was the way he did things. And then, I'm trying to think. He rode, when he graduated from the 8th grade,
Dad?
when Darwin did, he was bused like I was to Bridgeport High School. And that was a long way, you know, it's like 20 miles. That's quite a ways on a bus, I think. And he did well there. He was a good student, and he was popular because he was so handsome. He was always real handsome. And
Also pretty extroverted, I think, first half of his life.
Well, somewhat, yeah. He wasn't a clown, but he was friendly. He had a lot of friends. He was active in FFA, and because he was a farm kid, and he stayed with that all the way through college, and then he worked. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but he taught that years later. But anyway, he was on the football team for a couple of years. Played in the band one semester with me. I always played percussion. And they needed a percussionist just to play a drum, you know. You didn't have to know a lot to do it, and about it, you know. And it was the marching band. They just needed during football season, and he did that. Real active in FFA, and he was always on most of the time was on the honor roll, and maybe always, I don't know. But anyway, all the girls liked him. He always had a girlfriend. And
Had
in high school,
like dark blue eyes.
no,
right?
they weren't real. They were beautiful eyes. And when I first met him, I thought of him as having turquoise colored eyes. They were so
they
pretty.
were a little lighter.
Yeah, and just blue, just so pretty. He had pretty eyes. And he would always get a nice tan because he worked on the farm, and he'd go without a shirt, you know. But he always had a nice tan, and he was a dark complected guy. He had lighter brown hair, but he got his mother's dark skin. She had dark skin. His dad was real fair, typical German guy,
And we never did find out where the dark skin came from.
no,
Always wanted to.
yeah, you never know. well, we could pursue it further, we never have. And then, let's see, I think we've pretty well finished up. He was always, like I said, on the honor roll. And he was real active in FFA all the way through school. He was president and vice president and everything else in that organization. And his teachers liked him and the kids liked him, and he was a good all-around student. And I met him in at the end of my junior year in math class. And because
And he liked math, correct?
he did well in everything. Let's see, with his name starting with a W and mine starting with the letter T for Thorn, we were always if we were in the same class ever, we were always sitting together side by side. And that's how we got to know each other. And so then we started liking each other, and that didn't seem much in the summertime. I'm trying to think, maybe it was earlier on in our junior year that we got to know each other, became boyfriend and girlfriend. He wrote me a note and asked me to go out with him. I've still got that note.
I'd love to see that sometime.
I'll have to get it out. I think I know where it is. And then we became boyfriend and girlfriend. And we had one teacher, Mrs. Kirk. She was our math teacher, and she thought we were the cutest couple. And and I think that might have been part of why we got together. Because we sat near each other and side by side in that class, and she just thought we were really cute. And then she was an older lady, and so we dated.
I had a couple of memories of his childhood. I was told because he was the last child, and his mother, wasn't she like 45 when he was born?
Yeah.
He was not a planned child,
Right.
and we were told by Aunt Von Dean,
Yeah.
that when she was pregnant, really pregnant with him, and a car would go by, she would run behind a bush because she was embarrassed.
Didn't want anybody to see her being pregnant.
And then also Dad was kind of accident prone. So, for example, when he was a little boy, he was playing in the sawdust under some type of woodcutter.
No, his dad had a sawmill.
Okay.
And he did that right out over by the garage where they lived. And he had a sawmill, and he was working in it one day, and Darwin was playing out there in the sawdust under it. And Darwin stood up and raised up, and the saw hit his head. And so they grabbed him and took him to the doctor, and I suppose they stitched it. I don't know what they did. And he never had any after effects from it, but it was pretty serious. He had, all his life he had a big scar up there on his head from that. Yeah.
And then the other, another time, I think you guys were early married, and you guys were working outside or something, and he had a hoe in his hand. He was balancing the hoe by the handle.
Oh, that was when he was in college. Yeah, we were married. And when he went to college, he had we all got part-time jobs. And usually they were jobs, the university hired us to do stuff. And he worked at one of the university farms, and because he was an ag major. And that was a gorgeous, Southern Illinois University is a gorgeous place, and they had a beautiful, great big fancy agricultural building. And anyway, he worked for that, and he and one of his buddies were acting silly one day when they probably should have been working or something. And he had a hoe, and he was playing with it like you would a baton. And it slipped and came down and hit his shoulder, cut it real bad. And when I got home, I was I quit school after the first 2 or 3 semesters and went to work so he could finish. And I came home from work that day, and there he sat with that great big, he was at home, and he never was at home when I got home. He had sat there with a great big bandage on his shoulder, and I couldn't imagine what had happened, and so he told me, and so the doctor told him at the time he might lose the ability to use that arm, because it cut some tendons and things up in there. But that worked, somehow it healed. And so he never had any problem with it, but that scared me, when I saw that. So.
And then later in life, when you guys lived in Dunedin, he was trimming a tree in the front yard and accidentally fell off the ladder and broke his arm.
Yeah.
It
was his shoulder.
Compound fracture, I believe.
I don't know, but I had to take him to the emergency room that day. He had hurt his shoulder. In fact, he suffered the rest of his life with that shoulder. He could never raise his arm like he should have. He should have had surgery on it. He didn't. So, but what was scary too for me after he told me, we had, it was a brick home that we lived in, and it had a little, I guess it would have been a place to put flower bed, build out a brick thing, build out against from the house.
About halfway up, yeah.
And when he fell, his head just missed that, just by just a few inches. And if he had hit it, it would have probably killed him. So, that scared me when he told me about that. But, he'd do stuff. He was wild. He wanted to do things. But getting back to being in college then, he got along well in college and enjoyed it, and he worked. He worked in the orchards, he worked in the strawberries, he worked, several places. At the university had big farms. All those, in the Midwest, all those big agricultural colleges have maintained a big farm and teach the students. And then he, he always had a job doing that. Oh, and one summer, he got the chance to work at the mental hospital at Anna, Illinois, which was like 30 or 40 miles from the college. And so he worked down there in the yard of the landscaping area. And some of the people there, some of the inmates, I want to say, I don't know what they were called.
Patients.
Yeah, I guess. And, they talked to him, and some of them thought he looked Asian. They thought he was from China, or he was Chinese or something.
He did have very slightly almond eyes.
Yeah, he did. And so anyway, that was funny. He used to laugh about that. They thought he was a Chinese or something. And so he did. He worked. He always had a good job. Right after he first went to college, I felt so sorry for him. After he graduated from high school, he was going to go to business college in St. Louis, and he went out there. And of course, his sister lived in Belleville, which is a suburb out there. And so so one weekend he took the bus and rode down to Carbondale, where Southern Illinois University is, and where I was going to school. I went to school. I graduated from high school, and then maybe 2 weeks later, I was in college. I went to summer term, and I was ready to leave. I was ready to go. And anyway, Darwin took the bus down to Carbondale and to visit me, and he fell in love with the place. After living in inner city St. Louis, where he did live in that college he was going to, and so he decided that he would transfer to Southern Illinois University, major in ag, which is what he always liked. And so he went back and he visited his sister, Von Dean, and told her, and she had a fit. And then she called his dad and his brother, and everybody got on Darwin for wanting to quit his college that he was just starting in, you know. And but he stuck with it. Of course, he wanted to be there because I was there, and so he rented a room in a house not too awfully far from where I lived down there. I didn't live on campus. I lived in a big off-campus housing with 18 girls. And anyway, I think he lived with 4 or 5 college guys. And so he had numerous jobs. He worked at a grocery store for a while. And then he worked for a big dime store out at one of the shopping center. And worked there and really liked that job. I mean, it was, you know, I don't know, typical job, but they wanted him to stay. They wanted him to quit college and go to work for them and have a future in that company. And so that was something he had to think about. And I can't remember what else he did, but and then he started working. And that was the summer before. He wasn't in college at that time. He was living there, but he wasn't in college because he started too late. So he was in another college when school started in that summer term. And so then in the fall, then he was on campus in agriculture, and he started working then at the University Farms. And so it was, you know, it didn't pay much. They never did. I know when I was going to school, I was majoring in business, and I did some work at an office. It was the adult education office. It's where I worked at that time on campus, and I think I made 65 cents an hour. You know, it was just awful. And then later I worked full time as a secretary for the Department of Anthropology on campus. And anyway, so Darwin all that time was working in the University Farms usually. And then, you know, we got along, typical college students. We lived my parents bought us brought us, fixed up an old mobile home, and it was nice. I mean, it was old. And towed it down to Carbondale. And we, when we got down, it was winter time. Snow was on and everything. And we went to where we had made arrangements to have it parked at one of the trailer parks down there near the campus. And when we got there, it was mud, knee deep to our knees. And there was no way we could have my dad pulled it with his truck, and there's no way we could have parked that mobile home there. And so Darwin said, well, I've got a buddy that has this filling station. Darwin always had a buddy. And so we went there, and Darwin asked him, and he let us park there, that mobile home behind his filling station for 2 or 3 months. And then later we were able to get on and have it moved to the University Trailer Park, which was just down from the Dowdell Halls is what they were called, where all the football jocks lived, and down from that area, from the football field and area in there. And it was nice. It was lower. It was a lower area and land, and we could walk up a hill to get to school. And but we had a nice park there. And while we were there, we met some friends that we still have today, Bill and Karen Hedges. And we were just real good friends. They were down another trailer or so from us. And then Linda and Don Cloth, they were next to us in that trailer park. And then we knew several other families. We all got together, and we just had a real good time. It was a wonderful time, it really was. We did a lot of fun things together. And I remember we'd always go to the football games. And of course, at that time, you know, it was cold up there, and that was fun. We always go to those, and I always enjoyed the band and the when they had played the national anthem, it was beautiful. You know, they lowered the lights in the whole stadium, so it was real dim and dark. and they shined a great big spotlight on the flag, and then they played the national anthem, and it was so pretty. I'll never forget that. And then, you know, we went to a lot of activities on campus. Darwin used to take, at that time you had to take a course called, I don't know, it was a course that everybody had to take, one of those freshman things. And so he had to go every Sunday afternoon up on campus to this absolutely gorgeous old
Like a concert hall or theater?
yeah, that's what it was. I don't know what it was called. And anyway, I would always go with him. Well, of course, he was so interested that he could just take his books and study. Well, he'd sit there and study, but I just was fascinated with all the music. Of course, every music major had to put on their own thing, you know, when they got
Recital.
along, but anyway, they had all kinds of music, and I remember one Sunday afternoon, I can't remember what that was called. There was a name for that course. But anyway, we went and we were sitting there, and this beautiful concert hall had these floor-to-ceiling windows in it that were, the different panels were there, but they were beautiful. And you could see through them, of course. And I was sitting there listening to music, and I looked out, and it started snowing. And it was so pretty looking out there and listening to that music. So anyway, and Darwin, of course, like I said, he could have taken it or left it. He just was required to go. So, and then he was active in FFA there on college. He did that all through high school and was active, and of course won all kinds of awards in it. And then he went on to college, and he was active in it in college, and was an officer. And then he was an officer on the state level in Illinois for quite a while after he was out of college in agriculture, the FFA. So anyway, and then Don Cloth was an ag major too, and so they had a lot in common there. And Linda Cloth, his wife, was she had a photographic memory. She was real brilliant. I mean, she didn't have to work to go to college. She just, I mean, as far as learning anything, you know. But we were good friends.
Talk about
that's the years of college. Just
talk about when you went back to school and your degrees.
Well, let me mention when he graduated.
Oh, okay.
Because, see, I quit, and I went to
Yeah,
work.
you kind of talked about that last time.
Yeah, I worked for the Department of Mental Health for a long time as a secretary, and then it was changed to the Department of Children and Family Services, but I continued to work there, and I was involved in that for 5 or 6 years because he stayed in school. He graduated, and that was a big deal. That football field was full of graduates, and everybody under the sun was there, and he graduated, and Marion went to Illinois State with him. Southern Illinois University when Darwin went down there, and Marion was a year younger than Darwin. You know, I talked about Marion, and but he also went to school there. He was a chemistry major and went on to Yale. He was a real smart boy. All those kids that graduated from all of that elementary school up there at Chansey, they all were real smart kids.
Wow.
They all were on the honor roll.
Somebody did something right.
Yeah, they had good teaching when they were little. And so anyway, Darwin graduated, and part of his family came, and of course mine were there.
With his bachelor's degree?
Yeah, bachelor's. And he decided that he wanted to go ahead and stay there to get his master's. And so we stayed there, and I continued to work. You know, I was able to work, and I had a good job. It was interesting. My job was interesting. We worked for social workers and all those situations. I worked for the home finder and helped her with adoptions. that was interesting. It was fun. And I worked for the investigator. He had to go out and investigate these people that owed money because you can't always get all that free and stuff like that. And I didn't have to go with him on that, thank goodness. But anyway, but he was funny. He was a funny guy. He was a World War II veteran with a big, he was a tank driver in World War II, and his tank blew up. And he had lost, not all of his leg, but part of it. And he was crippled quite a bit from that. And I worked for Blind Services, and Alvin was I can't remember his last name. He was blind, and I worked for him for several years, or for quite a bit of time. And I'd go with him. He many times we'd have to take the train to St. Louis, and he'd go to a meeting and stuff like that, and I'd go along. And I didn't need to. I don't know why I went. It was just nice of him to take me because he knew his way around everywhere. He refused to ever use a dog. He just didn't think that was necessary. He had a white cane, but he could go anywhere. And Alvin was how I got that job. Karen Hedges was working there at the time, and I was tired of my job on campus, and so she said, well, I think there's an opening. Why don't you apply? And that's how I started working there. And but anyway, it was always fun to go with Alvin. He never got lost. I went to Chicago with him several times, just a day up, to take the train up, about the same distance from. Well, no, it wasn't. It was closer to St. Louis. Oh, and when Darwin, I'm not there yet. All right. There's so much to remember, and it all crowds together. But Darwin went to graduate school and majored in
Ag?
Yes, but it wasn't. I don't remember what it was.
Agricultural education.
Ag ed, I think. And he, of course, by the way, he had a scholarship when he went to college, and then and I must have had a scholarship to go through graduate school because I don't ever remember us paying for
Full
anything.
scholarship.
Yeah.
Nice.
Must have remembered that. And we never paid for any of that. And his dad couldn't, and my parents didn't, so it was.
Well, he made good grades.
Yeah, he did, and he worked part-time too, but yeah, he made good grades.
He was always very driven.
Yeah,
I like that about him.
Yeah, and active in the ag department and the
Well-rounded.
agriculture and the
Good
FFA,
leader.
and yeah, he was a good leader. He did well, and then so he graduated. He did his student teaching. Where was that? I can't remember, some small town in Illinois. He did student teaching. He and another guy drove each day. And then later, he started, I think he wasn't quite finished with his master's, but he applied for a teaching job. And the first one that was offered was to a little tiny town in the hills up above St. Louis in Illinois, on the Mississippi, where the Mississippi and the Illinois River met in that area. It was beautiful country. And
This was after he got his master's, or
no,
like an internship?
No, he stopped to start working. He finished his courses.
Between the degrees.
Yeah, he had finished his courses for his master's, had to write his
Thesis.
yeah.
Okay.
And so he started teaching there, and he was hired to teach there. And so we had bought a new car. How was it? And we bought a little Volkswagen. Linda and Don Cloth had a Volkswagen, and we always thought that was so cute, so we got a new Volkswagen.
The tan one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bought that car for $2,000, brand new. And so anyway, we had our mobile home pulled to, it was a big mobile home, a great big wide, 10-foot wide thing, at that time. and big long thing, and pulled it to Hardin up there. Uh, from Carbondale, you had, I don't know, we went, you had, there was a lot of the suburbs that you could go to, or you could skip it. We went around that, I'm sure. But there were several suburbs in Illinois that you would have to go through. And anyway, it was on the Great River Road, is what it's called, going up to Hardin area, and along from Alton, Illinois, and where Doris was born, and Jerseyville, Illinois. Anyway, we got, Hardin was an interesting little tiny town, and it had an absolutely beautiful brand new school. It looked like teepees. It was just gorgeous. And what had happened, that whole area of the country up in there was all artifact country, you know, from Native American artifacts from way back, you know, all of that stuff. Everybody up in there had a collection of artifacts. And so when they were excavating, they decided they needed to build a new school. The old school was right in the middle of Hardin, and it they had turned it into an elementary school. It was like one of these old brick 3-story schools, you know, or you know what they looked like. And when we had our mobile home, we pulled in, we got to Hartwell, and I'll get to the high school. I'll tell you about the high school. The high school then, when they were excavating for it, it was on top of a Native American village. And an old one, you know, I mean ancient. And so they redesigned the school to look like, it was a beautiful school, to look like a whole string of teepees. It was really neat. And Darwin taught ag, and within ag there was not only the farming end of it, but it was agribusiness. And he also had to teach shop. He was the shop teacher.
And he kept all his fingers.
Yeah, had an absolutely beautiful shop. The whole thing was really nice. He did a good job there. He was active. He was president of the association there at school, and he just did real well. And he enjoyed it. It was teaching ag at that time. You didn't really have textbooks. They wanted you to teach from the magazines and from the bulletins, in order so it would be new stuff. You know, a textbook is dated, and so he didn't have textbooks. So he had to write lesson plans like mad, and he did that. Well, I typed a lot of them, I know, and he did a good job at that. And of course I wasn't working. I did some help. I didn't have a degree, but I started taking college classes at Alton. They had a beautiful little it had been an old Baptist college there in Alton. It looked like one of these old Ivy League schools out in the east that you see on TV. It was a lovely old school. It wasn't real big, and I took classes there for a while, and then they built Southern Illinois University built a campus at Edwardsville, and now it's considered SIUE. It's a
Southern Illinois University
at Edwardsville, and of course Edwardsville's a big town, big city now, and that's a huge college. But at that time, I transferred out there then, and by the way, I had a scholarship too when I started back to school.
A full scholarship?
Uh-huh.
Nice.
I got it through the local
A service organization?
well, I'm trying to think. The Education Association, maybe. I'm trying to think how I got it. They had one available, and so I applied and got it, and and so that started me in college, which was good. I had to drive. When I went to college, I had to drive about 40 miles to Alton, and then further than that to Edwardsville when I started going out there. But for a while, I rode with a guy that he worked in a jewelry store there in Edwardsville, and he drove from Hardin he went to our church. He drove from Hardin every day, and so I rode with him. And I remember going in the snowstorms and everything else. And many times, I always got to campus in the middle of a big old snowstorm when a lot of the other kids couldn't. And so anyway, that's the way I went. And so he was teaching and doing an excellent job of it, and had all boys, because back then girls didn't take agriculture. And he had to he didn't teach just 9 months, he taught 11 months of the year, which was a good deal because he made a lot more money. But he,
Are you talking about Dad?
Darwin, yeah. And so he would spend a lot of time during the off months, the summer months, visiting the farms and where the kids lived and things like that, and that was fun for him. And we enjoyed it. He was in charge of his FFA. He had an FFA group, and he'd take them out to Kansas City every year to go to the national convention, and then every football game, his FFA group was in charge of the concession stand, and so he was always there. And they had it was a small school, but they had a football team, and it was fun. We were good friends with Bob and Linda Shanks. They were both of them taught there at school, and several others that we knew. And Hardin was an interesting little town. It was an old German community, and had a lot. People were drinkers, a lot of them, and we had always gone. Well, I didn't mention that earlier. When we were at Carbondale, when we left, to go to college, we never stopped going to church. We had both been raised in the church, and we just never stopped going. And we went to a lovely Methodist church there in Carbondale. Don Carlton was the pastor. He had a sweet wife, and just really, it was a lovely experience. And then when we left, the town of Hardin didn't have a Methodist church. In fact, it didn't have very many churches, because it had a big Catholic church and a big Lutheran church, and a lot of Lutherans, and a Nazarene church, and that's all they had there, I think. And so we ended up going to the Presbyterian church. That's where we began to be Presbyterians, and it was a fun experience, because Presbyterians had a mariners group, and it was young couples, young people. They were all about older than us, the Darwin and I, but they were all young people. And we just started going there, and they accepted us. They were so nice to us, and they loved having us. Of course, in a small town like that, you don't have a lot of young people that move in there, and so they treasured us, I guess. And that's where we became active Presbyterians, and we were active in Mariners, and we had a singing group in Mariners. At that time, the New Christy Minstrels was popular in pop music. I don't know if you've ever
I've heard of them, but
yeah,
I'm not familiar with them.
Almost like folk music. Folk music was a big thing back then, and so that's what we did. And I learned to play a ukulele. It was a baritone ukulele, and several of the guys played, and one of the girls played guitars, and one of the guys played piano, and then the rest of them all sang, and we sang too. And we'd do that a lot. We sang here and there. We'd go to the Mariner meetings down in the other areas, and perform, and that was real fun. It was a nice experience for all of us. And we had some real good friends in that Mariner group. 2 or 3 of the girls, they were all 10 years older than me, and but yet we somehow clicked, and we would go out and we'd go hiking together, and we discovered that Seth Thomas, the cabinet maker, there was a foundry, a brick foundry, in ruins down in the southern end of that county, which is right where the rivers meet. And we'd go down there, traipse through the fields and traipse through the woods, and go to that place and tour that around. That was fun. I've got some good pictures of it. And Darwin and I used to we'd go hiking. And after we had you, Doris, we would put you in a back carrier and we'd go hiking up and down those hills out there in Hardin, you know, and we enjoyed that. And then Darwin, one of the pastors we had at that time, was really into the archaeology. And so he and Darwin would go out and go digging, you know, and go on a dig. And so, you know, that Darwin enjoyed that. And they were good friends, he and that pastor. His wife taught kindergarten there in Hardin. And one year I assisted her. She had 45 kindergarten students. She was the only teacher. And so she needed somebody to help her. And of course I didn't have a degree or anything, but she asked me to do it. And that was a good experience. It was an eye-opening experience. We had big windows in that, one of those rooms that we were in, and they would open up, you know, like they would tilt out. And I remember we had this one little boy that kept going out the window. He'd go out every day.
Talk about ADHD.
He was a wild little kid. And
Take a drink.
I'm gonna have to.
I wonder if that influenced you to go into education.
Well, I knew I didn't want to teach kindergarten.
Influenced you not to go into early
Well,
education.
it was fun. I helped in kindergarten, and she'd have to go out and chase that kid. She'd have to go get him. So I'd take over the class, you know.
Lock the windows.
Yeah, a lot of little kids. And then and then I also assisted with the special ed teacher. She had Mongoloid children.
Which are Down syndrome now.
Yeah, I know. They would, she only had about 7 or 8 kids, 7 or 8 of them, because it's a small area anyway, you know. And so there was one little girl named Sarah, and we kept we were teaching her how to talk, and she was trying to teach her how, and that teacher was the pastor's wife. And we were trying, that's how I got that job. And we were trying to teach the little girl to write, to recognize the letter S. And at least some of the letters, and that's the one they were working on because that was on her name. And I remember how excited I was the day that she finally realized what it was. That's difficult. That's a difficult job when they're little like that and they don't know anything anyway, you know. A lot of those parents, you know, the trouble with the children who is Down syndrome, the parents don't work with them, a lot of them. Now they're better today, of course, but back then they didn't work with them, you know, and so, you know, the little kids just didn't know anything, you know. Anyway, so Darwin was successful there, and he spent 5 years teaching there. And he was in charge of the Education Association.
What was the name of that school?
Just Hardin.
Hardin State School.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it was a beautiful school, like I said. And we had nice neighbors. Quite frequently, I sang at church all the time. We had a choir, of course, and then I sang a lot of solos. And Mrs. Sweeney was our organist there, and she and her husband was a dentist, and they were older, and he had worked in St. Louis for years. They had lived there, and they moved up to Hardin and bought some property there in town and built a new dental place and had an apartment there and everything. And they went to our church. She was our church organist, and we had a big old pipe organ, you know. And it was a beautiful. Were you there? Did you ever go to that church? Did we stop and visit there?
No.
It was a beautiful. It had. It was ornate inside. It was a small church, more brick church, not very fancy on the outside, but the inside was just beautiful. Well, anyway, she was the organist, and of course she and I became good friends, and we visited the Sweeneys quite, you know, a few times, you know, and he moved up there, kind of retired from St. Louis, and had did his dental work up there in Hardin. they were a nice couple. And one of the other families that went to our church also had the funeral home in town, and they were right down the street from where Darwin and I lived. We pulled our mobile home in there. That's a story in itself. Anyway, I would sing a lot for funerals because I was shocked at how many people would have a relative that died and they didn't know anything about a funeral. They didn't know people sang and they didn't know anybody to sing. You know, they just weren't church people apparently. And so they paid me to do a lot of that. I sang for a lot of funerals. But anyway, what I should tell you, and to go back a little, they pulled that mobile home finally over to Hardin, and of course that's the Illinois River. That's a big river, and we loved living there with that. But anyway, it had a big lift bridge, which is rare. You don't find lift bridges, and every now and then the barges would go through down to St. Louis, and so they'd be coming through. Well, the bridge had to raise for them to get through, the tugboats to get through. And so you hear a ding, 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 and we rented our lot just about 2 blocks, maybe, or a block and a half from the Illinois River. And there was a street that went down between. But anyway, so we would jump out the door and run down to the river and watch the barges go through. We do that at night. In the daytime, sometimes we'd take a flashlight and flash it out there, and they'd shine their light from the barge over on us. You know, it was really a fun thing. It was exciting in a small town where nothing else went on. You know. So anyway, I'm trying to think what I should include there.
About Hardin.
Yeah. That was probably the most interesting place we ever lived. Hardin was an interesting town. And we went to a wedding reception once, one of these big old German wedding receptions where they'd have, these German families might have 16 kids, you know, I mean, it was an unusual situation. And I know they told us before we went, they said, don't be surprised if you see a 3-year-old out there drinking a bottle of beer. And so, but anyway, it was an interesting experience, and we enjoyed it. We had some good friends there. Still here every Christmas I hear from Bob and Linda Shanks. Get a big letter from them. And they live in Bloomington, Indiana now. Their daughter lives there, I think. And so we lived there for 5 years. And enjoyed, we really did. We really enjoyed every bit of it. And I got maybe half of my education as an education major. I was majoring in something. And then we moved. Darwin decided he wanted to get out of teaching because he wanted to make more money. So he applied several places and even some junior colleges. And the thing is, they were paying less than what he was making teaching at Hardin, and that was about the lowest pay scale in the whole area. And so he decided he had the guy, he was a good friend of the farm advisor there at Hardin, and he told him, he said, he said they need Farm Bureau needs a Farm Bureau manager at Christian County, over by Springfield, in the middle of the state. And so Darwin applied there and got it, and he worked there in Christian County, managing that Farm Bureau office. He did a good job there for a few years. And in the meantime, we finally had a baby.
But don't get into me too much yet. I just want you to finish your education.
Well, we had been married 9 years
degrees.
before we had you. And the first 6 years, after we'd been married 6 years, I had a miscarriage there. And of course, our friends at Hardin were all real careful of me and real nice. And then took 3 more years for me to get pregnant. And we had you and had a nice baby shower there at the church they gave me and everything for you. And of course, you came a month early. You've always been in a hurry, Doris. You came a month early, and so the day that we were to have the shower, I was in the hospital having you. And you were born in Alton, which was about 40 miles away, and that's a story in itself.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we, Darwin did real well managing that Farm Bureau, and we had big meetings. He had a board of directors that he worked with, and he went to all kinds of meetings throughout the state of Illinois and spoke, gave a lot of speeches and things like that, and worked for several years doing that, and was very successful at it. And it was an important job. It was nice. We moved to Taylorville, Illinois, which is in Christian County. That's where his office was. And you were a baby at the time, or a little child. And we had a lovely little home in a subdivision there in Taylorville. And I was active in the women's club, and the newcomer. I guess it was a newcomers club. When we lived in Hardin, I was active in the women's club there. And at that time we went to the Methodist church there in Taylorville. I don't know why there was Presbyterian church there, but I don't know why we went to the Methodist church. We had some of Darwin. We got to know some of the farm families there, you know, in the area. It was a big farm. That's big farm country up in there. Big important job, and that was right in the center of the state. And you know how the land is. It's all farmland and beautiful flat country. And we had some good friends that were farmers, and they were Methodist, so I guess that's why we went to the Methodist church.
But did you continue your education there?
I had to, when we moved, because I was studying at Edwardsville at Southern Illinois University there, and I had my scholarship, and we moved, and I wanted to keep the scholarship. And so there was a new school starting called Sangamon State at Springfield, and it was a school that was based on political science. It was a political science school because Springfield was the seat of government there in Illinois. And had a lot of the professors there were senators and things like that. Anyway, I was able to go there, and for a while I was taking library courses. I thought I would like to be a librarian because it wasn't, you know, I couldn't get a degree in education there, but I could get state certified there. And so, but anyway, I worked on that. Well, then I found out that I couldn't go any further at Sangamon State.
And how far was Springfield from Taylorville?
Oh, I don't know, 20 miles.
Okay, that's not bad.
Real close, 20 or 30. And I would drive. And you were a baby, and so I put you in a nursery school at that time. And Darwin was just busy all the time. He traveled a lot and it was a really good job. He liked it, but it didn't pay quite what he liked. You know, Darwin.
Story of his life.
Yeah. And so anyway, it was a nice community. And
so what did you do about your education?
well, I continued then. I commuted and I continued and went to Sangamon State. And I graduated from Sangamon State.
With
and
your
I majored
bachelor's?
with my bachelor's. I majored in literature
Oh.
there. And it was concentrated in Illinois literature, which did me no good in Florida. But anyway, and I remembered my graduation. The campus was new. Most of the buildings were temporary buildings. Now it's a big built-up campus and it belongs to the University of Illinois now. But it was a small campus. I had some good professors, and it was a small liberal arts type school. And so I got some really good training and some good classes, but not in education necessarily. But I had enough education courses that I satisfied my requirement, but it wouldn't have been as specific as if I had stayed at Southern Illinois, or if I had gone to Illinois State. Illinois State was always known as teacher training school. That's how the town of Normal was named, because way back in the 1800s, it was called the Normal School, because that related to teaching at that time.
What year did you get your bachelor's degree?
70, I want to say 70, 74, 78, something like that. 74, 70, I think it was.
Because I was about 4 or 5, I think.
Yeah, you were. And it was cute. We had the Oxford style mortar boards, which wasn't a border. It wasn't a board.
It's like a tam.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And it was nice. I wish I had kept mine. I didn't. But that was nice. And my graduation was held in the bigger auditorium there in the city, because there wasn't, Sangamon State didn't have any big buildings at that time like they do today. And so.
Skip ahead and don't necessarily talk about Normal or whatever, but just tell us briefly about your master's degree and we'll kind of finish your education and then go back again.
All right, well, so Darwin was promoted to the main office of the Farm Bureau. Illinois Agricultural Association is what it's called. And that's in Bloomington, Illinois. And so we moved over there and rented this we bought this beautiful 2-story, it was a bi-level house in a nice subdivision there, and that's where we lived when you grew up. You went to school there. You went to elementary school right in our subdivision, really, although it was a long walk for you sometimes, but it was right there. What was the name of it?
Well, Oakdale was a little ways away from our subdivision.
That was right.
But junior high, Parkside, was near where we lived.
Yeah, that was in junior high. Yes, before you went to, when you were in elementary, you went to Oakdale School, which was in town just a little more from where we were. And I think we had to take it. You didn't ride a bus.
You took me to school and I walked home.
Well, that was from Parkland. You didn't work.
I walked home from Oakdale.
From Oakdale, did
on a regular basis. Yeah.
Oh, it was that close.
It was a ways.
Yeah, it would have been. Parkside was just down the street.
Yeah, not too far.
So anyway, we lived there, and Darwin, then he worked for the Illinois Agricultural Association, and that was a great big fancy building out there in town. And he had to do a lot of traveling and a lot of speaking, and he had to, he worked mainly with the young farmers. So he would go to different towns throughout Illinois and visit them and work with them, and he did a lot of traveling, and they sent him on a lot of good trips. That's how I got to go to the Bahamas a couple of times, and came to Florida 2 or 3 times, I guess, or a time or two, and and when he was still at Harvard, I forgot about that. They put him in as a senior class sponsor. And him and some guy from New York, and everybody hated him because he was such a strange person. They thought he would attack their kids, their girls, their daughters. And he probably would have. He was weird. So anyway, he was the other senior class sponsor. And so when it came time for the senior trip, they were going to go to New Orleans and ride the train down from there, from St. Louis. But the parents rebelled and wouldn't let their kids go on the senior trip if he went along. And so Darwin, he had to take him by himself, and so they wanted to know if I would go and to help monitor those kids. And they were good kids. It's a small class, and we had a good time. It was interesting. That's when the first time I ever went to New Orleans, I think. No, I take that back. When we were in college, a bunch of us got in the car one weekend and drove down to New Orleans and Florida and places like that. So anyway, that was a nice trip. One of the girls had muscular dystrophy, and she was crippled. And we all went out to Lake Pontchartrain for a day out at the beach. And she, of course, she sunbathed and everything, and it reacted with her and made her legs all swell up, and they were burnt real bad. And oh God, I thought I was going to faint
Like
when
sun
I saw
poisoning.
it, because the last thing her mother told me was, "Take care of my little girl." And so anyway, I called after we got back to the hotel. I called the doctor and told him the situation. You know, every hotel has a doctor or maintains one. And he thought for a minute. He said, "Well," he said, "I don't think it'll be any problem," but he said she needs to stay off her feet. And of course, these are all good Catholic. A lot of these were good Catholic kids, and they all were planning to go to Washington. I think it's Washington Cathedral down there, and which was a beautiful place. And she had to miss that. She was real disappointed in that. But she got along all right. Her legs were just swollen double. It was awful. But anyway, she did all right. She had to miss going to church with the kids that time. And so I stayed with her at the, Darwin went with her, but I stayed with her at the hotel. So she could stay in bed and keep off her feet, you know. And but the next day she was okay, pretty much. I mean, she still didn't look very good, but she could get around. So that was the situation there. And so anyway, we were back at Taylorville, back at Bloomington.
Yeah.
Yeah, we enjoyed going to the Presbyterian church there.
And
Very wonderful. And that's where we met Cordelia's
Right.
parents. He was a pastor at our church, and she was her mother was a pastor too, but she didn't work at our church.
And we'll get back to how life was and family and all of that, but I just wanted to briefly talk about your degrees.
Okay, now
And then
all right.
go back.
Okay, now while we
Lived in Bloomington.
well, while we lived in Bloomington, you know, right just a few blocks from Illinois State. So I thought, well, this is silly for me to sit around here and not go to school. So my scholarship took it. I was able to get my scholarship and finish it, and I finished at. I had finished at Sangamon State, and so I had a degree when I moved to Bloomington. And so I did some subbing, of course, in Bloomington and in Normal. And then I got hired on at one of the schools. It was south of Bloomington, actually, but it was in the Normal school district. And I
Which
taught Brigham
Oh, okay.
Elementary, and I taught remedial reading. And I had concentrated in reading at Illinois State. I mean at
Sangamon.
yeah, Sangamon. And so.
Did you start your master's degree when you were working at Brigham?
No. Well, I guess I did. I started taking a few classes for my master's there at Bloomington. And then I've skipped the Reese. I left out 3 years. When we left Taylorville to go to Bloomington, we got a home up there, an old home, and that was real close to campus, Illinois State campus. And one day you were out in the front yard, and some car stopped, and they tried to coax you to get into the car, and you ran off, and you came in and told me, and I thought I was going to pass out. Oh, it shocked me awful. And so, and Darwin and I, while we lived at Taylorville, he had a secretary and a board of directors. He was real busy and important. And he started staying out late. And so I put up with that for quite a while. And so, you know, we moved to Bloomington. And when we got there, he continued to do that. In other words, he was having some affairs. And so I told him, I said, this is it. I'm not going to hang around here. I'm not going to put up with you. And I'm moving. I'm leaving. And because at that time we didn't have our new home yet. We had an old home. He bought some property close to campus there in in Bloomington, and after we moved there, and he was going to make student property out of it, which he did. He had student housing, and but he was so preoccupied elsewhere, and I was very unhappy, and you hadn't started school yet. When did you start school? Oh, yeah, you had. You were in school.
I started kindergarten in Bridgeport.
Well, okay, this is before. This was.
That was
I
the
guess
summer before.
That, and for 3 years. 3 years, I got another job in Potomac, Illinois, teaching remedial reading in that. And that was a good job.
Before your master's.
Yes, and I didn't start my master's until I went there, until I
Oh.
started teaching there at Potomac. Because, well, maybe I had started maybe at Illinois State, I guess I had. And then at Potomac, I decided I would take, what did they call them? Anyway, the colleges would come around and give classes.
Oh, okay.
You know. And I drove over to,
Danville?
yeah, I guess Danville, and took some classes.
Okay.
And Rossville too.
Huh, I love Rossville.
And yeah, we liked Rossville until it burned down. Of course, that was after we left. And then, and so I would go for night classes over there.
I had no
got some- I
idea
had
you
some
were
good
working on
teaching.
your master's in
Yeah,
Potomac.
I was taking classes.
And that was through ISU.
Yeah, Illinois State.
Huh.
Uh-huh. Because see, I
Well,
had
that's
started.
good that you had that opportunity.
Well, yeah, it was,
Yeah.
because I mean, down the street, you know, I suppose, I don't know where it was, maybe it was even, where did we go? No, I drove over to Rossville for that, and I went to Danville.
How far was Rossville?
10 miles, maybe.
Because Danville was what, about half hour?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not very far, not even that long, I don't think. And Danville was a bigger town, of course, Rossville was a small town, right on Route 1. And so I was in Danville several times for meetings. I'd go down there for meetings because that was part of the district that I was in at Potomac when I taught school there. Teaching at Potomac was a delight. Remedial reading I loved, and I had
I remember your classroom.
real tiny classes, and yeah, my classroom was divided into 4 sections, so there were 4 of us working in there all the time. And but you started school there, and
Yeah, that was my second element.
yeah, I spent a month or so at Mother and Dad's
Right.
after I left Darwin, and school started, and I put you in kindergarten at Bridgeport. And she hated to see you leave because you were so smart. You were the smartest one she had in class. And but
That's 'cause
anyway,
you worked
we
with
moved up to Potomac, and I rented this room in the upstairs of a big old apartment building. It had once been a church, and we had a room up there, and it was a nice big room. And I had to go up the outdoor stairways and things like that.
Well, we'll get back to life later, but I
Yeah.
just wanted you to
Well,
talk about your
Okay.
master's degree.
Well, I got the master's when I was at Taylorville.
You did?
Yeah, and when I graduated, went to I went to.
No, your bachelor's you got when you were at Taylorville.
Oh yeah, bachelor's. That's right. I'm sorry. And,
So master's you would have finished probably at ISU.
yeah, I finished my master's, but I didn't go through the graduation exercises.
Okay.
I thought, this is silly. Why do that? Why spend that money to rent all that stuff? But I regretted it ever since.
And your master's was in education.
No, it was in reading education,
Okay.
and that was.
And what year did you get your master's?
I think that was 78,
Okay.
and so and I told you about, you know, I didn't go through the graduation. It was just like another day, you know. And they sent me my diploma, you know. But I would recommend people not do that. I think that's too much effort put in to not have crowning time. You know?
Did Dad go to his master's
Yeah.
ceremony?
Yeah, I missed that. When we lived at Hardin, when we moved there, he had his master's done except for writing his thesis. And I had to type that thesis, and everything had to be perfect. you couldn't have any erasures on it. You couldn't have, I mean, every page had to be a certain size, it had a certain paper, had to be typed, certain font, everything, it was ridiculous. And I don't know how long I worked typing his thesis. But anyway, and so he graduated and got his degree.
What was his thesis on?
He had, his work that he had done on it had been taking surveys from schools and kids all over.
So about
Illinois.
ag education.
It was it was agribusiness. It was how to apply getting the students involved in agribusiness.
Okay.
Because agriculture was moving out of just the farms. I mean, it's
Going into
farming
big
is a big important thing,
corporations.
but you also needed more information, and you need to have a business degree to be a farmer. You could be a farmer, but you needed to have all of this training and everything, and that's what his study was in. And so
What was your thesis?
I didn't have to do one.
Oh.
I opted to take extra classes because I thought I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't, and I didn't want to do the research, and so I said I'll take the extra classes, and that's what I did, and that was good. I learned a lot,
And you did write a children's book called Apps Bunny,
Oh, that was for one of my classes that I had. Yeah.
non-published.
Oh yeah, yeah. I still got it. I got an A on it. But
Based on my cousin Jeff's
oh yeah,
childhood
Jeffrey
stuffed
had
animal.
a toy bunny that he called Apps, and that's how I came up with that. So
Well, why don't we stop there? We got through education, we talked about Hardin and jobs and everything, and next time we're gonna go back and talk about your wedding.
well, it wasn't very fancy, honey.
That's
It was
okay.
a nice wedding, but.
All right, thank you.